Now, if we move back to the other angle from the back, I want to show you another thing here, which is that there is quite a lot of arrow to expand through the clicker. It's a little bit hard to see because of the size of the video, but as the archer comes into full draw, if I just let it play here, as the archer comes into full draw, pretty much there's still quite a bit of arrow to come through the clicker, as you can see here. You can see the silver of the point still in front of the clicker. Now, because there's a lot to expand through the clicker, this then makes it likely that the archer feels that they need to pull very hard and expand, and that's where the movement of the head and the face is coming in. So these things are all linked, and ideally we would get this amount to expand through the clicker down and have it a bit more accurate, and this will really help your accuracy long run as well. Now finally, let's look at the first angle again and the release, and we'll see here that it does appear that the release is a little bit too far away from the face in terms of the direction, and we can see that here. While I'm here looking at that, you can also see that the tab leather is a bit too big here. There's quite a large piece of leather under the bottom finger that's extending past the finger onto the string, and this can cause the release not to be as consistent and could affect the arrow flight as well. So I'd normally try and trim that leather down a bit and have it closer to the bottom of your finger. Obviously you still want the finger completely on the leather, but you can definitely trim some of that down a bit. And now let's look at the release. So after the shot, the release here is generally too away from the face. Already at this stage it's kind of away from the neck, and then by the time that the archer gets to their follow through, the release is quite long, and the distance between the neck and the hand here is probably too long. And you can see this also in the next video. You can see the release being away from the face just as the archer releases. You can see here the hand is away from the chin and the neck, and then as the archer releases it kind of comes out and then comes backwards, and it's quite long. So this is an area to improve as well. So those are the main key areas in terms of going through the shot one by one and looking at everything. And now the important thing to realize is how you can prioritize these areas and what you need to work on first, because there are too many things here to work on all at once. And the important thing here is to make it simple and just work on one thing at a time and improve gradually. So let's look at that now. So when it comes to working on technique, there are two questions I like to ask. The first is, what one thing can I improve in my technique that will make all the other things improve as well alongside it? So this is a really great question to ask, because often it finds a key area that can improve other parts of your technique, and by just focusing on one thing you can have a great impact on the rest of your technique as well. The second question is, if I'm only allowed to pick one thing to improve, I can only focus on one thing, what is that going to be to have the biggest impact? Now, these questions sound similar, but the answers are not always the same, so I like to ask both of them. But I'd like you to have a think now in terms of what is the biggest area that you would improve here, and then we'll go through it step by step as well. Now, in this case, the area that I would improve first, if I could only improve one thing, is definitely the position of the shoulders and the movement of the scapula through the shot. And this is also the answer to the other question, which is, if there is one thing that could also improve other areas, what would that be? Because improving the shoulder positioning and the movement here will also improve many other areas of the shot. So this is the one key thing I would work on here and make this a real priority in the training. There are other areas, as I mentioned, like the bow hand, tab leather, the release, the expansion through the clicker, but the one key area to work on here is focus on the shoulders and the scapula, because that will have a knock-on effect on everything else, and it will make everything else much better anyway. So this is the one key thing to focus on here. So why would we work on this area of the shot? Why have I chosen this area of the shot? So as I mentioned before, there's quite a lot of arrow to expand through the clicker at the moment, and by focusing on the shoulders and the scapular position, what's likely going to happen is, because the archer at the moment has some tension in the upper traps and the shoulders and the neck, as you relieve this tension and get a more free shot and use the lower muscles of the back, this is probably going to actually increase the draw length. So this is going to help the issue here about having too much to expand through the clicker without actually changing the clicker position, and also this will help then the issue of having to move the head through the shot to expand through the clicker. So that will be two knock-on effects here that are almost solved by, just focusing on the scapular position and the shoulder movement. So this is really, really beneficial because it has a really good impact. Then secondly, because the expansion is less, you have less to expand through the clicker and you don't need to move the head, it's much more likely that you can then make the release much better and much closer to the neck and follow a much better path. Because at the moment the shoulders are quite tense, this means that at full draw you're holding this tension, and then as you release, the tension around the upper parts of the neck is just released, and then this causes the hand to be away from the face as well. And you can see this really well from the third angle of the video, and I'll show you now. So if we go to that angle, you can see, as I mentioned before, that there are the creases in the neck here, and you can see these creases, and then just as the archer releases, these creases disappear because all the tension in the neck disappears, and then this means also that the movement and the direction of the shot is kind of gone because this tension is disappeared and you're not using the lower muscles of your back. So you can see here as the archer releases, the creases are there in the draw and the expansion, and then just as the archer releases, the creases go from the neck. Watch that crease particularly on the draw shoulder side. Here it's there, and then as the release happens, gone. So this is a key indicator here, and improving the usage of the scapula and the shoulders will massively improve the release as well and give you much better direction and movement through the expansion and follow through. Finally, working on the shoulder positioning and the scapular movement will also actually improve the posture slightly as well. Now the posture is already pretty good, as I said, but it does appear that both shoulders are slightly rounded over in terms of as I mentioned before, the bow shoulder being rolled slightly and then the draw shoulder being a bit high. Focusing on and improving the scapular position and movement here will make that posture, the final part of your posture to do with your upper torso and your shoulders, much better. So this will have a positive impact again, and it will make it, as I said before, much easier to expand through the clicker consistently and smoothly as well. And this will improve your release and also your grouping, and your grouping will be much better. So now we're going to look at how you would go about improving these areas in your training and what your training plan would look like for this. Now when it comes to the archer having the draw shoulder high, there's a particular area here that's causing this through the shot, and that is when the archer is lifting the bow. As you can see here, if we just focus on the draw shoulder side, as the archer is lifting the bow, you can see the draw shoulder immediately starts to raise, and then especially when you're getting to the setup position here, the draw shoulder is really quite far forward in terms of the joint is almost being pulled forward, and then it's also kind of high, and this is putting the shoulder in a compromised position, and in this position you can't really use the lower muscles of the back, and then this is causing the upper traps to activate as well. Then as you draw through the shot, you can see that this draw shoulder side remains high, and it's a little bit hard to see behind the hand here, but if we go to the other view on the back, as we saw before, this is remaining high through the shot. So that's a key area here that needs to improve, which is to lower the draw shoulder side through the raise and the opening and the setup of the bow, and make sure that there's space around the shoulder joint. Now I'm not talking about dropping the shoulder, I'm not talking about lowering it and feeling like you're pulling it down. I'm talking about keeping it in a neutral position rather than allowing the bow to kind of pull it up. So that's a key point here. And on the bow shoulder side as well, by setting the hand in the grip, as you can see here, if I just go back to the beginning of the video, by setting the hand in the grip quite early, you can see here, it's a little bit hard to see from this angle, but the tension in the bow shoulder as you come to set up. So if we just put that there, if you focus here on the bow shoulder, as you come to set up, and then there's that slight roll of the shoulder, that makes it much harder to keep the shoulder lower through the shot. And as we saw before, there's tension in the upper trap around there. If you are not focused so much on trying to set the hand in the grip so early, it can make it a bit easier to feel the lower parts of the bow shoulder in terms of feeling the bow shoulder set from under the arm rather than at the top of the arm. The position here where the archer is trying to force the hand into the grip and it's quite an angle, tends to make it you feel the bow shoulder set from here, and then when you raise the bow you're still focusing on the top part of the shot. So this is an area that can really help improve your bow shoulder position if you then start focusing on the correct things here. So how are we going to improve these things, and what are we going to do in a training program to improve this over the long run?